Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the 13th Fleet After Action Report. I am really happy to announce that we now have a sponsor. So I want to thank Admiral Tater's Ship Shop for sponsoring the show. There is now a link on the screen, so if you want to copy that and go check out his stuff, he has got the absolute best accessories for Armada that you are going to find anywhere. I will also say that if you have played in any tournaments, you probably have already seen them. So check it out, see if he's got anything that you need. I'm sure that he does. Tonight we've got a really special show. I'm very excited. It is a chance to talk about the future of the game with some of the best people, best informed people to have this conversation. So tonight I want to go ahead and welcome, as usual, Admiral Tater himself, Garrett Vance. We have Tim Bailey with Crabbock here as well. And we have Ken Krajniak from Ion Radio. So, thank you guys for being on the show. I really appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thanks for having us.
So,
it's a pleasure to be here.
So I wanted to look at what we can do as content creators and supporters of the game, lovers of the game, to help not only, maintain the community, but perhaps even grow it despite what has happened with AMG. And so, with that being said, I sent a few questions out so that you guys would be prepared for this. With no new product being made, no new official product anyway, what do you think you can say to newer players that could lower their level of concern about the future of the game? And we'll start with Tim.
Well, honestly, it's not an easy question, and it's not it's something I see a lot. It's not something that's going to be a simple one-stop shop answer. Because initially, I'm tempted to say just keep playing, and definitely there's truth to that, but you have to demonstrate it also. You have to keep having tournaments going, and you can point towards Worlds. You can point towards a year of continued support, and you can also point backwards and look. AMG never made any ships for this game, and it's still been growing. And so why should that suddenly change when AMG is going to give Armada the exact same level of support that they've given it for the past 4 years, for the next 20 years, right? It's almost great news for the game, because it means that constant waiting and wondering, will there be news? Will there be something? Now all of a sudden it's like they kind of chop the puppy dog tail off, and that's a terrible analogy, as a matter of fact. But yeah. So I'm gonna stop there. It's just I think it's like they ripped the Band-Aid off like all at once, and now we don't have to worry and wait anymore for bad news. Sorry about all. No puppy dogs were harmed in the making of this statement.
I don't know. Maybe that's why the view screen behind you has the bridge of the Imperial Star Destroyer on it.
Oh well, we'll get there. We'll get there. There we go.
What do you think, Garrett?
Oh man, well, I've kind of expressed how I'm more positive at this point, especially with the way that the community's come together to move forward, managing the game, especially after OP stops at the last official Worlds. I'm more excited about that postseason than this season, only because I know that as a community, we know what needs to get done immediately with this game. As far as rules based on points, more like it. It's not rules. Armada's an elegant, beautiful game, but points on certain things can be changed. That just absolutely tweaks how this game is played overnight. With how squadrons and how tight you try to make your 400-point competitive fleets. But as far as keeping people playing, the only real answer is people who want to cultivate communities are going to have to work twice as hard. And that means constantly being on Reddit, Discord, Facebook, YouTube, pushing content out to capture audiences. I think our job is made easier because the game is actually good, and it has really good models. And there's a lot of resources now that exist to make getting into the game with even difficult to find things very easy. Uh, so as long as you're making it known that this is a thing that can be played in your community, people will play it. But then the next step is you need a place to play it. And so if you're going to play it at a local game store, you and your group need to also support that game store by purchasing other things. Because obviously they can't buy Armada. So again, I always say this: game stores aren't charities. So when you go in there, you need to purchase items, whether it be food or other games or paint. So I think going forward, there's a lot of examples like the Star Wars CCG, even the Star Wars miniatures, Imperial Assault, that got kind of axed or whatever a few years ago. Like the communities are still creating content and there's still players. So, and X-Wing and Armada have much even bigger communities than those. So I think for at least the next few years, we're gonna have a pretty good time until whatever comes next, because Star Wars space battles aren't gonna be off the table forever.
And what do you think, Ken?
Well, I'm going to agree with a lot of what's already been said. I mean, we're in a situation where new product is not being made. So what's out there is what's there. Although Garrett hit one point that, I'll throw a little ray of sunshine hope maybe. Imperial Assault, I've seen like a resurgence of new products in stores. So maybe Atomic Mass might print new ones, probably not, but maybe there'll be some new Venators that'll eventually come out. Having said that, my pipe dream's over. I think we have to look at it in a couple different ways. One, this has been a problem that we've had as Armada players for a while. If you wanted an Architans until relatively recently, it's been near impossible to find. ISDs has been a while to get those as well. So this is something as Armada players we're kind of used to. It's stock is always questionable. I think what we're going to see is, as with any time where a game is no longer directly supported by the manufacturer, in this case Atomic Mass Games, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to leave the game, whether it's now in the next couple months or after Worlds 2025. Those collections eventually are going to make their way in the secondhand market. It'll be relatively easy to pick those up, and we're not going to have the $400 Venator thing forever. It'll go another couple weeks, and then all of a sudden you'll be able to get them for 50, 60, 70 bucks as opposed to 400, and you'll be able to pick up collections for 400 or 500 instead of $16,000. And that's how new players are going to get into the game. And I'm looking at the community we have locally here in the Chicagoland area. And I actually just checked, it's up to 122 members on our Discord. And I would say about half are actively trying to come to the store every week, to the point of where, okay, we can only have 20 people in for each slot. And we've got 3 slots a day. So, in theory, we could have 30 games of Armada going over the course of a Sunday. And it's on a Sunday of all days. So anyways, there's that component part that's kind of being thrown in. As a community leaders, you have to get out to the stores. You have to make sure that as new players come in, you've got people willing to share their existing stock, their stuff with the new players, so that you can get them into the game, because it's just a matter of time before they're going to be able to get their hands on something. And maybe there's a warehouse somewhere that's been sitting on a crate of ISDs that magically just show up, and as soon as you get it, maybe they'll be able to get their hands on those. But again, like I said, some folks, they're going to say, yeah, you know what, I'm done with Armada and I'm out. Those will come onto the market. There'll be people like me that, do I really need to have that 6th ISD? No, I'm going to sell it off for the 40 bucks or whatnot. I do not have 6 ISDs. I think I only have 5. So, but I do have 7, I think, Liberties. I might be willing to part with 1 or 2 of them.
Calm down, kid.
I'm looking for a Quasar, okay?
So am I. I only have 2.
I
kind of regret never going with that 6 Quasar meta that was starting to take off for a little bit.
Yeah. I think I always like to say to people, they printed ships for 10 years. So there's stuff out there. Yeah. We just have to access it again.
Well, I just want to also point out that there are games out there that the manufacturer, the original manufacturer, no longer supports that have come back. Heroescape is a great example, as they had a tournament scene going for years after the game was out of print, and now it's coming back. So, I don't know if it's under a new manufacturer or not, but somebody has picked that up and run with it again. And if you continue to show the support for Armada, there's a possibility that somebody will pick that up and run with it again. So it's something that this game can be kept alive, and I want to reassure the newer players who are, maybe just now discovering how awesome the mechanics are and how well the game works, that there is still a game to be played. We just have to get you in touch with the players that can show you how to play the game and make sure that you have a group to play with on a regular basis so that you don't lose that interest.
Right.
You mentioned Heroescape, so it's funny because that's actually over at Renegade Games now, and somebody who's working on that is somebody some of your viewers might be familiar with, a guy named Alex Davey, who was instrumental in X-Wing and Armada, as a matter of fact. So it's funny how things kind of come full circle like that.
Yeah, and welcome, Marzuma. Glad to have you with us this evening.
Mars, another legend of Armada, like casual.
Hey, Mars.
How's it going?
But I think another thing, as far as dead games or whatever, we're at a huge advantage here because it's a Star Wars fleet game, and it's just popular, and there's no alternative. I know that I'm a lot more excited about Star Trek Into the Unknown that's coming out. It's another pre-painted fleet-based game, very narrative-driven, just like Star Trek is, right? It's not about the battles; it's about the personal characters, right? So there's not something for people to jump ship to. So as long as Armada is the only option, even at a degraded status, it's still going to be what people find when they Google, I guess, right? Like fleet action. Because anything else is, I know Crabbock does a lot of stuff with, so like Snap Tactics, I think it's called, and there's other games, but they're just not the same scale as an IP like Star Wars. And that just carries a whole lot of weight by itself.
Yeah, I mean, Ken and I have joked about Firestorm Armada, which is a fun game, but it's not something that's going to grab people's attention.
Right.
I think Call to Arms with Babylon 5 is going to be a hard sell nowadays also, just because, that's been, 20 years since Babylon 5 was on the air?
Yeah, I think there's a Battlestar Galactica, too.
Yeah, I have a lot of that sitting around, and Ares Games lost the license right before the big ships were about to be released, so a little sad about it.
I wonder a little bit about Halo. Talking about a game that was popular that I think there was like a Halo Fleet Battles a long time ago that had been very popular, that like people were kind of devastated when it shut down. And I know Mantic has Halo Flashpoint that's supposed to be coming out later this year, which looks like a really, really fun game. But it's ground. It's kind of like the deathmatch you would have in Halo. But I think of a company who is focused on miniatures getting the Halo license and thinking, I don't think they're going to stop with just one game. I know a lot of other companies, when they get a license, they're trying to make money. They're trying to keep the doors open, but they're also trying to capitalize on the licensing fees and everything that go with that license. And so I feel like a possible resurgence of Halo Fleet Battles, or at least a spiritual successor to it, could potentially be on the way. And as more and more fleet games comes out, I think more and more awareness will be coming out towards fleet games as a whole, and maybe even some lessons learned community-wide for all of these games. Like, I think, honestly, it would be great if Armada was made at a slightly smaller scale, and you could, slightly smaller miniatures to facilitate 3x3 gameplay instead of 3x6 as the standard, because then you would have so much of an easier time for stores to have tournaments and organize play and support and get more people into a store? How many times have you been to playing where, hey, we're at 18, we're at capacity, nobody else can come in, and for a game that has had no new product, and I mean that still happens here in Orlando all the time. We regularly fill up for our monthly tournaments, and I would love to be able to hit twice as many people.
Right. Yeah, a 6x3 is actually huge. Because that's just the mat, and then you got to add all the stuff to the sides. And I know that was brought up in your interview with Max Brooks and Michael Gurns on Into the Unknown, and with the 3x3 playmats, it's a genius. It's a simple idea, but it's really intuitive and like on how that helps everybody, right? Because logistically, even when we do casual nights and we have 10 people show up, we're half the store, and then some, because it's so much stuff. Yeah. But I think one thing I wanted to say was, in Armada, 400 points isn't the only way to play. You can also play smaller 3x3 task force battles, like Rebellion in the Rim. And that stuff's really good for newer players to get used to mechanics. And so if people are out there, you don't have a lot of space, running a narrative campaign with smaller fleets is always a good idea.
I'm always a big fan of campaigns anyway. Just I like the development that takes place during the course of a campaign in just about any game. It's part of the reason why, I was a big fan of Necromunda when it first came out under Games Workshop, the building the small unit tactics in the gangs and seeing how they develop over time. It was really, really a great setup. And they tried to come back to it, but I don't think that they have trouble sticking with anything that's not 40K prime there.
Yeah.
There's some truth to that. I do miss Necromunda, and although Blood Bowl has made a resurgence,
it keeps on going in and out. I think this is like the really fourth time that they've tried to push that.
Well, still people playing it all the time, though.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, we had agreed that for a fan-run system to work, it was really important to have a unified vision of what would be, how that would work out. So how important do you feel it is for the majority of the Armada content creators to be on the same page, and how do you think we can best accomplish this? I rambled there. I'm sorry.
I think, Chris, it's important that it's not only the content creators, but it is people running events, and it is the community leaders that keep people coming to their stores. And I think it's, when you start looking at that end of it, it's also your tournament organizers, your judges, and things like that all more or less have to kind of be on the same page. And I'm going to kind of maybe take over this question just a smidge here, only because I've got a little bit of firsthand knowledge of stuff that's kind of coming through the pipes. I'll throw a little spoiler on this stream just for everyone, but I've been talking with the guys in terms of ARC, the Armada Rule Set Collective, and the current plan. So we pretty much have the core team more or less set for the time being. There'll be changes to it later, but a lot of it not until post AMG's OP support is concluded. But what I can say is we're looking at having a press release probably right in the vicinity of Gen Con at the end of the month. Might be a little bit before, might be a little bit after. It's a matter of going through the specifics and make sure that what we're saying is what we can say. And again, this goes back to legalities, IP policies, and all the rest of this stuff. So something is coming. We're working on things, and there's a lot of things going on in the background. Having said that, before we kind of came forward with, hey, this is what we want to do in terms of ARC and working with Adepticon to have that community-run Worlds 2026. So a year and a half plus away. I did reach out to a lot of tournament organizers around the world. Crabbock and I had a conversation for probably about an hour before I had an announcement going on. And he asked a lot of tough questions on, what we were looking to do and everything else. Because my personal opinion is if we don't have people's buy-in on what we want to do with the game in a community-run perspective, specifically around competitive tournament play, it's not going to work because then you're going to immediately break into multiple different factions and kitchen homebrew, which, to be fair, anyone playing it on their kitchen table, I'm willing to probably bet the vast majority of them are dealing with the same group of 4, 5, 6 friends, and they're probably playing a couple rules incorrectly because their view on how this card works or this rule interacts with that one. It's like, well, this is how we think it works, so we're going to play that way. And that's fine. That's great because there's no wrong way to play with plastic spaceships. The issue would always come into play when you have someone for the first time coming to a store, they go to a tournament, and their interpretation is not the way that the judge is going to rule it, or that the competitive group, which is a smaller percentage of players at large, are actively playing it. And that's okay because that's part of getting new players into the group, and they go, oh, that's how that works. That's interesting. Let me go ahead and I'll bring that back to my friends, and then they're like, oh, that changes the whole game. This is so much better. And then they move on, or they say, man, I don't like that. I'm just going to go back to playing the way I'm doing it. And when you get to that level, if you're homebrewing, and hey, more power to you. But I think it's important from the competitive side to have that all on the same playing field, because if you don't, then if I go to a tournament in Chicago or a tournament in Lexington or a tournament in Orlando, and there are 3 different ways to play Armada at a competitive level, something is not, I will cease traveling around to do that. So when you have the vast majority of your organizers, your community leaders, and we've got a lot of content creators believing in the kind of the same thing, it's important for us to all be on the same page and say, yeah, this looks like the right way to go. And I think it's also important that if, let's say, ARC starts going in a completely wild, off-the-wall direction, that these same community leaders and content creators say something, because we don't want to go off into left field and create another situation with, let's say, for example, Anakin Skywalker, coming in, or no limit to flotillas, because those of us that have been playing the game for a very long time remember that evil portion of Star Wars Armada. I'll pause there and let Garrett and Crabbock talk a little bit, but I mean that's kind of my thinking behind a lot of it, because again, it's if people believe in it and people want to play at a competitive level, if you're playing at that same spot, that's, I think, the important thing.
Go ahead,
Garrett.
Jim.
You want to go ahead? Oh, no, I'll take over. Okay. Sure. So I'd like to take this time to introduce to the world the new homebrew that I'm going to be pushing. I have a Lucre Hulk that I've designed. It's going to have 7 shields. I actually took a Sharpie and wrote a 7 on the dial. It's got 33 hull, and it only costs 50 points. So you can run as many as you want. Bring it to tournaments, and if somebody says it's illegal, you tell them Crabbock said you can run it, and it's an official steal. No.
Now, what kind of upgrade slots does that have?
Everything. You can put everything on it. It gets a discount. -2 point cost to every upgrade you can put on there. You can take upgrades from other games, and you can put it on there. You can do homebrew upgrades as long as you made them at work, so it doesn't violate the homebrew one. You have to make them at work. No, there's a lot of homebrew out there, and I'll echo a little bit of what Ken said. And if you're playing it at home, that's great. I've run into issues where a lot of people have been trying to push their homebrew off as official, and like what I want to avoid is we've seen a huge influx of new players. I'm currently the admin of the Star Wars Armada Facebook group, as well as my own communities, and there's I've seen the largest uptick in new players that I have ever seen in the game over the past couple of weeks. It's massive, and so I've seen so many new players come in and say like, oh wow, a Star Wars miniatures game, because it's been in the news lately, and I want to avoid an abundance of homebrew being mixed in with official stuff too. It's one of the things that I worry about, and I think it's important to have everybody on the same sheet of music as what is what Star Wars Armada means. When you say I play Star Wars Armada, what does that mean? What flavor of Armada? What kind of Armada player are you? There's memes, right, from the Civil War movie, right? So it's just like, well, you play Armada. What kind of Armada do you play? And that's the thing that worries me, because I've seen so many things where somebody comes into the game. It's like, oh, there's Clone Wars in this game. Cool. Do they have a Lucre Hulk? And the answer is no. They don't have a Lucre Hulk. We don't need a Lucre Hulk. You know how many really good carriers, like Separatists are good on carriers. They don't need another carrier that's like a big tanky ship. They've got, and I'd love for people to think, hey, you know what? If you really want a Lucre Hulk, proxy it, print one out, or buy one from an Etsy shop or whatever, and put it on that Providence base. And now you have the miniature there, but you're still playing the same game as the rest of us are. That's one thing I'm really in favor of, and I try to push. I try to encourage people, because then, and of course, if you're playing in a tournament, you have to have TO approval, and you bring the original model with you, so you can swap it out if it becomes confusing. But that's one of the places where I stand. But also, as far as having content creators and everybody on board, and TOs, Ken is exactly right. It's not just content creators. You got a YouTube or Twitch channel. That doesn't make you an authority. It takes everybody's buy-in, and we have to stay as a community. And so far, we've done really well.
Yeah, amazing points. Especially on the new player thing. The new player confusion is huge. Because I see a lot of people who jump into the game, and they've never played with the base ships, and immediately start creating ships. And I feel bad for them, because I don't think they'll ever know what Armada's like, as far as like how the game's supposed to work. Because if they went with that first and really dive deep, then they could create some really good homebrew in the end. Because new expansions are just official homebrew, right, with the seal of approval and a bunch of people working on them. So but if you don't really dive into especially competitive play, I'd say is where you learn a lot of how mechanics work, and timing and rules is so extremely specific in this game. Then you'll never be able to design a really fun Lucre Hulk by itself. So I don't know, but yeah, good points. New players.
I'm going to throw two things in addition to what we've been talking about, I think, that are relevant. So Crabbock mentioned the flavor of Armada that you're playing depending on where you go. And I think one thing we all have to consider is that at some point, if you get to homebrew rules, and I'm not suggesting that people are doing this, but if you do, at what point does the game you're playing cease being Star Wars Armada and is now Star Wars homebrew? And it's more like X-Wing or something, but it's not Armada. And to Tater's point, same thing. You got to get that core experience, and that's where you learn the different parts of the game to be able to have that experience and understanding of the rules to move forward with being able to enjoy the new things that are coming out and understand how that fits into the system. And I think when we're talking about extra models, I 100% agree. If you've got a Lucre Hulk model, you want to put it on a Providence carrier, go for it. I think that's awesome. If you want to replace your MC-30s with the Dreadnoughts, that's fine. I think the key here is if you're going to do it, you do not want to intentionally try to confuse your opponent. If you have 6 different types of miniatures on that are all MC-30s, people are going to sit there and go, well, which one's that, and which one's that, and which one's that. I mean, if they all look kind of the same, then fine. There's a guy locally that puts a red dwarf model on one of his MC-30s, but we know that's foresight. So but again, it's a matter of that end of it, and I think that's important to remember, because whenever you make a change, it's easy to create new stuff. It's very easy to create new stuff and add it into a system. What's hard is when you take a look at what is not working presently in the existing system, and how do you have to change that in a way that's not going to create a bigger problem moving forward. And that's anything from I'm going to make one card 1 point more or 1 point less, to a change like how Evade changed in 1.5, which between that and how all the refresh costs now, or the fact you have to refresh APTs and ACMs eliminated a lot of those black die crit things where you'd get two shots, your proton torpedoes would go off twice, and you're half dead after one attack. So there's a lot of things to consider whenever you're making changes. And if you aren't familiar with the game, you're just going to make changes because it sounds like a neat thing, not realizing that you could be impacting the rest of the experience of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I've played several different competitive tabletop games, HeroClix being my most recent experience before getting into Armada and X-Wing. And game balance is just something that is a constant fight for anybody that is developing games out there. It's one of those things to where, yes, I want to give this faction or this piece the flavor that it should have based on what it's done in movies or TV or in comics or whatever it's coming from. But by the same token, I need to make sure that while it has this flavor, it works with everything else that is in the game and doesn't suddenly everybody wants to play this because it's the only thing to play.
Yeah, should the theme come first or should the mechanics come first? And I think the answer when it comes to game design is the mechanics have to come first, and then you try to apply as much of the theme as possible. I think when you're looking at creating a homebrew, because I've created so much of it, and I've got a lot of it on my website, and honestly, most of it is it was just a fun side project. It's not like stuff that I would actually encourage people to run, officially or anything like that. But it's fun to look at and get ideas with, and it's fun to write down ideas. But I think you have to look at like what does the game actually need right now. And I think for those of us who play competitively or casually or anywhere in between, and if you've been playing long enough, you've probably identified certain things. Like I'll throw one out there. I would love to see Separatists have another commander that is not a ship-to-ship commander like half of their commanders are. I'd love to see Separatists have a commander that is bomber-centric. That actually, fills, they have this gaping hole in the Separatists' kind of pizza pie. They've got a giant pizza pie with only pepperoni on like maybe 2/3 of it, and they need pepperoni on those other. I am using the pizza analogy. I use weird analogies sometimes, but yeah, like that's you got to look at where's the need that needs to be filled. Not what do you want? Like so many people want a dreadnought, and I get it, but does the game need a dreadnought? Probably not right away. Maybe someday, maybe 5 years from now, we'll get to that point. But what really needs to be filled right now? Fill that need. Create something. Don't even put a picture on it. Don't put a name on it. Just call it X123. Find something that mechanically works really, really well. And then when you've completed that and you've got it as close to perfect as you can, then see, well, is there a ship or is there an officer or what have you that actually suits this best? And if there's nobody, then make it a generic. Just call it, tactical officer X123. But if there's somebody like, oh, this actually works really well for Han Solo, then maybe you've got a nice homebrew there.
I don't know. I would argue that we need buzz droids.
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure back in the day, 2019, somebody had that on a PDF somewhere. It's on some file system, like a real obvious addition. But that's what I'm most excited about moving forward with the arc, is just the fact that we've all come to the agreement as a community that, all right, we're going to follow this situation and we're going to start making progress basically with the game. Like how the progress we had with the errata from last year, which was huge. Changing those onagers and Ramadi. I know everyone was really upset about the Slavican or whatever, but listen, I was so sick of constantly playing against onagers. Not because they were the hardest thing in the game, but it just broke my immersion that every space battle I was engaged with was this super laser situation. So it would be really nice as a community if it like once or twice a year we make changes like that change how you play the game and what ships you can take. I'm just super excited because it's, everyone's like, oh, the game's really stale. I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, but there's a ton of stuff that we own, like I have a huge Rebel collection, and most of it's just not great. And I'm really looking forward to just little adjustments that need to get made to bring stuff like the MC80 Home 1, right, up to the same pick rate as an ISD2, right?
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, which would be, there are a lot of people out there that are saying, this needs to be changed, this needs to be changed, but ultimately we've got a pace change, I think, and I just wanted to hear your opinions on how the pace of change should go and why it's important to pace that change. And I think I want to start with Ken on this. Put
So
you
I
on the
think,
spot.
yeah, that no, that's fine. I kind of figured some of these questions might come right to me again, just because involvement directly with ARC. Um, I'll throw this one out because this is what we're actively talking about. First of all, again, until the game is no longer officially supported, there's going to be nothing that comes out because we don't want to put something out tomorrow, as an example, and then we get a Rapid Reinforcements 3 that completely invalidates everything. That's item number one. Item number two, if the game's still supported, we don't have the right, I think, to actually say, okay, this is how we're going to start playing Armada now. So we got to wait until that's done. Um, Now, I mean, there's going to be kind of a mini exception with Richmond Open still being a supported GT, but AMG's not really supporting Armada anymore for like a month or so. So there might be something that comes out there, but that's kind of a nebulous gray area situation. What do I think needs to be done with change? It's got to be slow, and it has to be measured, and it has to be looked at. You're looking at a 9 to 18 month development timeline to come up with your set of ideas, get those properly play tested, well, vetted before you even play test them. Like, okay, if we make this change, what is the worst thing that could potentially happen? And then try and mitigate that, and then get to the point of, okay, we think this is a good spot. Let's get this into our 3 to 4 teams of play testers, or however many it winds up being, and see what they think, and then get that feedback back. Look at how that has an impact and then move on through development process. And sometimes the answer is go back to the beginning and start again. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's better to do that than to, this is good enough, we're going to push it out. As soon as it gets out in the wild and you go outside of 30, 50, 60 play testers, stuff's going to be found that we didn't think of that. And then you have to look at how is that having an impact on the game. And this is one area where I have to say I like what Atomic Mass did with, they released Rapid Reinforcements 2, and it took a little bit of time for them to come up with that errata, but that errata was actually pretty solid in terms of what it actually did. So you have to kind of look at it from okay, this is out in the wild, this is not working, it's going to be a few months for us to kind of adjust that properly to have it fit into the right spot. By the same token, if you've got the same group of folks looking at it saying, for example, with Draven, well, okay, no, you can't take a second token. It's just like if you have a token already, you lose your dial tough. That would have been a better decision, I think, with Draven than what wound up being the case officially pre-nerf with the errata. But again, it's who's in charge and making up these concepts. How is it being play tested now that's being pushed out? Now, the question after I prefaced it with all that, was scale. I think you're going to probably see something after Adepticon, probably in the April, Mayish timeline. And I'm saying generally, not that it's going to happen in 2025. But you'll have something that comes out about then. And that might be, here's some neat new change that we're going to throw out. And maybe in 5 years, here's the Luger Hulk that Crabbock designed, and we made a little tweak too that makes it even better.
Oh, 9 shields. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be 9 shields. And, it's going to be costing 165. But no. And then you'll wait until probably the October timeframe, give that news change to have time to kind of go through its paces. And bam, here we go in October. Here's an errata that's going to fix it. And if there really isn't a need to fix it, okay, here's the second half of what we were thinking of doing that might be a little bit better. And I think if you have a consistent 2 or 3 changes a year, and I'd probably put more emphasis on 2, one at the beginning of a tournament season, so you get it that April, May time frame, and then the tournament season kind of kicks off May the 4th, because why not, and ends at Adepticon. You've got that 11 months to kind of go through things, maybe a change in the middle because this tournament meta is really going in this direction. We want to make it more open. So here's the change that's going to make that we're going to make that's going to allow that to happen. Or maybe at some point a great idea for a campaign comes out and that gets put out in the October timeline, or maybe that's just a bonus feature. But I think the key is not to do too much. If you have a release every month, every 3 months, it's going to be too much. And it's not like it's a production house able to put out new content. The other thing to keep in mind, specifically with Star Wars Armada, it's not a simple game. There's more nuance, there's more complication to it, and there's more to think about. So it takes a couple months for people to say, here's the upgrade card, and ooh, here's a neat way to use it that no one's really thought about.
Let me break this really fast.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, it takes that time frame to kind of get through it, and then you start seeing it be prevalent.
I'm still seeing upgrade cards that work in ways that I've never seen before, like the title for the Raider that allows you to redeploy. So if you're going to run the and then if you have Gunnery Chief Varnillian on there, she has an effect. It's like when you deploy, and so since you deploy twice, you get to put like 2 different dice on her, and it's just like, how long have I been playing with this, and I never realized that. That's like, it's such a corner case, you know. And there's things like that are just like, wow, I need to look at this again.
Right. I've been specifically playing with the Home 1 title on an MC80 the last probably 4 weeks, just to see if I can't figure out a better way to do it. And man, I almost knocked a Star Destroyer out in 1 turn. That was kind of cool. And I finally did an Akbar Splash. That was the neatest thing I ever did, albeit I did it with an MC30 and I took out fresh Gazanthis to the left and right. But still, 1 activation, 2 Gazantis down. That was cool.
Have you done Akbar Nebulons? Because this is my challenge to the entire Star Wars Armada community. You gotta try it. I'm telling you. Okay, so can I tell us a quick story?
Oh, go ahead. By all means.
Okay. All right. So when Anakin Skywalker came out at first, 1.0, and was broken as all get loose. I don't even think that's a real word. I just made up another phrase. So anyway, we had a fellow that was showing up to our tournaments that was running Anakin, and he was really working on a competitive build. And our current meta at the time was very casual to medium, and so like sometimes people would bring try hard lists, but most of the time people were playing kind of like, I'm going to try out something different. I'm going to try out double interdictor and see if I can win an objective. You know, like just trying out, you know, a lot of jank or something halfway competitive. And this guy was bringing like the most competitive list possible, so he was just dominating everybody, getting 10-1s, and bringing the same list. So like 3 tournaments in a row, he brought this exact same list with like minor tweaks, just trying to get like, you know, perfection. I brought Akbar Nebulons, and I almost beat him. I was a single die from beating Anakin 1.0 with the Akbar Nebulons. A single blank die that if it had been a hit, I would have tabled him. And I'm not to say that it's that good, but that he wasn't expecting it. So he didn't fly defensively enough, and he sort of underestimated me, and maybe even dismissed it as a joke list, which a lot of you guys right now are thinking this is a joke list. It's a little better than you think. It's still not top tier, but it's at least mid tier. Yeah,
it's got teeth.
It definitely does. It definitely does. And there's ways to make those Nebulons have gotten better over the years too. A Nebulon today is so much better than a Nebulon when Armada first launched. The evades do so much better for it. There's better support teams. You can boost those shields up on the side. You don't even need the redirect nearly as much. You got a high engineering value. You can do so much with that ship, and it's good. It's good. That's my story.
Last chance, everybody.
One world.
Yeah. Oh yeah, right. It is current world's reigning ship.
Yeah,
that's true.
Vanguard. But I was gonna say, last chance, everybody. Gamers Yield. I think they still have Nebulons in stock. You need I think 5 of them to do it right. 5 Nebulons.
It works. And they're a good ship. It's one of my favorite ships. It's so iconic. Also, it's a beautiful ship. And the EC Henry like Imperial Nebulon variant too is just such a cool model. I have some of those that I'll run as placeholders, you know, for proxying periodically. Great ship.
Yeah, with the up armor, looks really good. Yeah.
I just want to point out that, anytime changes are made, they do not just change the ship that you're looking at or the upgrade that you're looking at. They change everything that interacts with that. So anything that you bring to the table is going to be affected by that change. So if you were to bring 5 or 6 changes in the same environment and something was broken, you're going to have a hard time figuring out exactly which piece of that is broken. So that's my perspective as far as why it's important to pace change, because you may want to see all of this new cool stuff or new interactions and everything, and we all get excited when we hear new, but you don't want to break the game just to bring something interesting and new to the table.
Right. Well, I think the plan forward is really, really easy, right? For Arc. We don't need any new stuff immediately. I have a binder of shame cards behind me that have never been pulled out. There's a lot of stuff you can add to this game. Like 40% of the stuff is just not competitive. It can be used in edge cases, but like not greatly used. But what I was going to say was, one thing I hear a lot when people build Armada, they say they don't want to build a competitive fleet. I hear people say that all the time. I'm like, all right, it's just because your cards, the cards in this game are like any card game. They're made to work together. Don't put 2 cards that aren't made to interact on the same ship. It's not an optimal way to build. Just think about it, and think when you're putting stuff together, it's okay to think that you're having fun, but I want you to think about it like a card game where you're building blocks of the cards interacting with each other. I feel like I really messed up when I said that. Well, basically what I'm saying is it's don't put 2 cards that don't function together on the same ship. That's not just building stuff for fun. That's just randomly putting cards on a ship. Find a way to take that one card you like, and then find other cards that support it, like any card game. Because Armada is a card game with ships.
Yeah. Unless you're not running any upgrades.
Yeah,
then it's
exactly.
just ships.
Yeah, but then you're probably running some sort of Admiral.
That's fair.
Specifically is boosting those ships. So, I don't know.
But I mean, you don't even have to consider that just in the case of cards. There are certain ships that probably don't support each other as well as you might like them to.
Right.
I think going back to rules changes and stuff too, there was something else I wanted to kind of add on. I think a lot of people have very different things that they want to see changed, and there's 2 different schools of thought here on ways to positively impact Armada and the meta, and one of them is rules changes, but other one is points changes, and those are 2 very different things. Both of them can have sweeping impacts, and they probably don't want to be done at the same time, at least as sparingly as possible, because you might bring a couple of popular upgrades down 1 or 2 points each, and then it takes time to watch that develop. But if you were to make some rules changes and you release those at the same time, again, they can conflict, kind of like what you were saying, Chris. But those 2 things kind of have to be independent of each other, I think. But also, I think we all have kind of a wish list of things that we'd like to see, and I'm curious if and you guys watching or any of you guys here, can I ask a question of the group? What would be what's on your Mount Rushmore of little tweaks of things that you would love to see in a dream world? For me personally, I've got a lot of them, but I'll throw one out there just to get the ball rolling, and I would love to see ignition change to where you can actually salvo ignition if you are already within range, because that rule never really made sense to me, and it seemed like it was future-proofing, but the future is now.
Yeah, that's a really good one, Crabbock. I want to know. I'm sure someone has told me on the Discord at some point, why they chose to do that. It just makes 0 sense to me. Why you can't salvo an ignition shot at all. I guess they thought the Onager was potentially going to be underpowered at some point, which is interesting. I don't know how you could come to that conclusion, but
My
I
thoughts
mean,
is
I
because
didn't play
Salvo
that.
was brand new at the time, so since Salvo launched at the same time as Ignition attacks, they didn't want to confuse people, so they put that in there as like a no-brainer. Like, oh yeah, and by the way, you can't salvo an Ignition because they don't want you salvoing across the board at this range 10 sort of Ignition attack, and would the rules already forbid it anyway because you weren't in range of the printed rear armament. I don't know. Maybe they were going to plan on doing a new color of dice for the printed rear armament. We were going to see ships with green dice in the rear that had like a range ruler that was as tall as like a 14-year-old.
Yeah, like the X-Wing Epic, the one that combines together.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. So as far as the dreams, I've got like a stack, but my
Make
number one
ISAR
thing
great
is.
again.
Oh, what'd you say?
Make ISAR great again.
Oh my god! Oh,
Oh
Wish the
boy,
great ever.
that's a good one.
See, Mars, you're stealing my ideas. Thanks. I appreciate that.
That's the one
We've
card. I don't think you can do
member
anything to.
on the stream here today with Mars from Fly Casual. I mean, Chris, you've got like the powerhouse here of some of the top creators.
I will.
Yeah,
I
we're
will
just-
take
we're
it.
just missing-
Thank you.
Just to downsize it.
I was just gonna say, if Ben was here too, I mean, you'd have pretty much everyone, at least on the YouTube side.
Yeah. But what I was gonna say was my number one list at the top is Luke Skywalker should be a preeminent, always picked squadron at all times. When you're building a rebel list, your question should be, how do I make Luke Skywalker better with fellow squadrons? Not how can Luke Skywalker ever make it into a list. He should be add up to double bomber, okay, blue. I don't care. Double reds, sure. Make it so it's more fair, I guess. And then brace evade, or brace scatter. Make it completely broken. I don't know. And then keep his ability where like he goes through shields. He should be like Vader and Anakin, just absolutely outrageous. It's Luke Skywalker. He's the face of the franchise, more so than Anakin, in my opinion.
What if you gave him a once per game ability? You left him exactly as is, but you gave him a once per game ability where he could set one of his dice to any side.
I don't think it's enough for once per game. I don't think it's enough. I think the issue is
I
he
still
has
run him though,
escorts.
so I still think he's great. But I mean, he could be a little better, I guess. But I still run him quite a bit.
He needs to be Merrick Vader rage inducing. Like people need to get annoyed when they see Luke Skywalker on the other side of the table.
Well, now which Luke is he though? Is he, because he looks to me like he's Episode 4 Luke, so he's still farm boy. He hasn't even trained with the Yoda yet, right?
That's true. You could do it. Okay, well, we could do like what they do with Vader and make it Episode 5 Luke, right, where he's got 3 years of experience under his belt. Yeah, either way, I
Put
don't
him in a
care.
snow speeder in space.
Yeah, I mean that'd be good.
Luke Skywalker, top of the list.
I think, I mean, other than the fact that Mars stole my joke change of Izard, and Tater here just went and took my idea with Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, get
I'll be
ready.
honest. I think some of the better stuff that I would like to see, because Armada's been out for almost 10 years now, and when you're looking at any game system that's been around for this long, if you don't necessarily want to go to a second edition or make a rules change, kind of like what they did with 1.5, and you have to kind of start looking back at your original stuff, which was designed around point game, and it never really quite made that leap into the 400 point. And I'm specifically looking at stuff like the Victory and even the Nebulons to an extent. You kind of have to look at that with all the new upgrade cards that have come out, and maybe those ships need kind of a points rebalance because they were based on something different. And you start looking at Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, and even Han Solo. I got to bring in Han Solo for Ryan just because I have to. But you look at all that first like wave or two, which when you look at Wave 2, Battle of Solace, that was what, 2017, I think, when most of that came out. That was a long time ago. Things have drastically changed in the
I think it
Armada
was earlier
world.
than that.
I think you're
Massive
right.
Console,
It
yeah,
might
I
have
think
been
it's like
2016.
2015, 2016, yeah. Because
Yeah, so
2017, I remember, was Wave 7, so that was when
you're
the
right.
Chimera came out.
You're right. So I'm even going further back. So you got to look at that stuff and say we need to bring it up in line with where it should be power wise or points wise to be more efficient in terms of list selection now, so that you see more nebulons in general lists. You see the victories come out in imperial lists, and you have to make it so that it's cost appropriate, so that by the time you built your victory up, you might as well just grab an ISD two upgrades and you're doing better. So things like that need to change. You need your reason to bring Luke Skywalker. You need your reason to bring Darth Vader in the TIE Advance, and of course you want to have Chewbacca in the Millennium Falcon, because why not? But I mean, this is also where you have your opportunities to bring in Han Solo and an Imperial shuttle, because why not? It's Return of the Jedi Han Solo, maybe a slightly different ability. And while we're talking about the Imperial shuttle, here's the answer to Crabbock's question. Jendon needs to be changed because he's way too powerful.
Yeah, he's a multiplier, and
Yeah.
multipliers are very dangerous because you have to look at them at their most. You have to, and that's a way to balance stuff. How is something most broken? That's where you point cost it, and that's where you fit. It fits in the game at its most broken. You don't balance it on where you might else see it. But yeah, he's nasty. He's very nasty. And as like with Vader coming out in the Defender, I've seen Jendon just get. Jendon's here to stay. He's never going away.
Right. Yeah. Well, he's an unrestricted multiplier. Right. There's no like it can be activated, unactivated. It doesn't matter. And he's got relay. And he's like impossible to kill. He's a real problem.
There's another change that was good with Armada when Relay, and I think Relay was originally intended to be if you can control that, you chain it. But when that first came out, and it's, oh, hey, I've got the CR90, or not the CR90, but my Gazanti all the way in the corner, commanding Jendon over here on the opposite side of the board. Oh, Armada's been through some interesting pitfalls before. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, when we talk about changes, there are two things that I really want to see, and one is actually completely new, and I already said that. Buzz droids, I think you have an upgrade card for the carrier that gives your squads the buzz droids, and that's where you go from that. But more importantly, CIS Gazantes. I just they need some help. That is my opinion.
I'll fight you on that. I like him. Listen, flight controller Gazanti with the CIS is good. I'll just say that. I like it.
I think one of the things you look at though is you look at really strong CIS lists. Look at Martuk or TF, where every shot you're adding dice to, and they're the cheapest platform that can throw dice, and so there's a little bit to consider there when if you're going to make changes to them. So that's something to think about. I think a better way to make them more valuable would be the introduction of a better CIS commander, that now all of a sudden, hey, you know what, I can use these Gazantes as carriers because now I have more incentive to do that, and because I have a commander that works better with with squadron commands and things like that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for being on tonight. It has been a great conversation. I think we've touched on a lot of great topics, and it's been a really big pleasure to get to speak to you guys for the first time. I've spoken to the two of you in the chat once or twice, but this is the first time we've ever actually really gotten to have an in-depth conversation. So again, thank you. I appreciate your time greatly.
Thanks for having us. It's been wonderful to be here.
It's a huge honor.
This was good.
All right. Well, I'm going to say good night to all of you, and I hope you have a great week. I'm going to have a few words for the viewers as I close out. So take care, guys.
Bye. Thanks again.
All right. So, again, thank you for joining us. I hope this information was good for you. I hope it was a good conversation. I really got a lot out of it. I think it's something that we're all thinking about, and it's important to keep in mind, how to be a unified community and how to not only generate interest, but there's going to be a certain degree of attrition in any game, even if it was still being supported. So I want to make sure that we all look at that and think about ways that we encourage new players to play. We're not going to hold anybody hostage and make them play this game, but if somebody comes to the table and looks at it and is interested, then we want to really encourage them to join in, because a big community can be strong, and it's nice to have everybody on board for that. So I want to thank you again for watching tonight. We will try to get this up on YouTube a little bit later on. Also, I want to remind you, next week is going to be another Star Wars online session. So you get to see me and Mallet playing our Sith. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying that. On top of that, this Thursday we will have Rebellion in the Rim done with the Clone Wars stuff. So I'm really looking forward to getting into that. It's going to be the first actual battle, whereas we had the preview last week. This week we're going to have an actual knockdown, drag out fight. I'm going to be trying to get some new camera equipment in there to make it look a little bit nicer, although the higher resolution recordings have been fantastic, and I am very much looking forward to getting back into that. So thank you for watching. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will catch you later.